Welcome to the Table Talk podcast. This is a unique podcast that we have today as we are on a retreat with our team here in Austin, Texas. And so we are just going to chat we talk a lot about the 5 pillars of health. And one of those pillars is community and having community. And part of why we even have this team of health professionals that are working together is that we didn't want to do this in a silo. We wanted to have community surrounding helping people. And so we're just going to sort of share a little bit about what community means to us, and we'll just see where it goes. So thanks for listening in or watching if you're watching on YouTube. So Nicole, why don't you talk to us first, since you have the microphone, about what community means to you and what it is that you feel like people are missing maybe in our current society.
Yeah, well, I know I can speak to myself as people even on this one because I recently moved across the country and I don't know anybody where I am. So having space to be able to connect with other peers and other women and people who are doing the same thing as me, or trying to at least, is really powerful, especially in person, because we're all virtual. We live all over the place. And yeah, one of my goals when I get back is to find my own community in the town that I live in. So it's more and more obvious as time goes on that that in-person connection is so necessary for us to live healthy, happy lives.
Yeah, awesome. Anyone else want to share a community?
I'll share.
Okay.
So I am a new-ish mother for the first time. I have a toddler, and I feel like for so many women, especially kind of in that, midlife, I guess, age range, we tend to just kind of put social connection and community last. We're taking care of everybody else, and that just kind of gets put on the back burner. And so for me, not only getting to be around this team of amazing pharmacists from all over the country, getting to be in one spot together with like-minded people and just sharing our stories and fellowship, but also just being with other women and, having time for myself, and I'm not taking care of anybody else this weekend. It's just so important. And again, we hit that sort of perimenopause age, and it's hard. Having adult relationships is hard because life gets harder and harder. To connect with people, life gets crazy. So being here together, just it solidifies that for me. You have to be intentional about cutting out time to be with those people who really lift you up and make you feel better, and it's important for our health. So
awesome.
Angela?
Yeah. I'm going to kind of add on to what Megan said about, I think it depends on your season of life you're in, but I feel like connection for me right now is very important. Back home, I have friends who are parenting children about the same age. It's good to be able to see what they're doing, learn from them. Also, as parents get older, being able to kind of relate and have support in those areas as well. This group is excellent because it's great, like you said, being around other like-minded people, working on some of the same areas of health, being able to learn and share, just so much collaboration, and just knowing that other people, can help you out, provide advice, and just learning from those around us. And then I do think, too, it's important, like we said, as women, finding a group of friends or people that you can, step away from your role as, maybe a pharmacist or a mom or caretaker, and just being yourself and being with your friends and taking time for yourself as well.
Yeah, and I was going to add on, I guess, too, to what Angela said. When you're in different seasons of life, you find yourself in different pockets of community. So, for example, neighbors who have kids the same age, or, parents of other kids who play the same sports as your kids. So you find yourself really with them oftentimes throughout the week week and on the weekends when you have going to soccer tournaments and gymnastics meets, etc. So it's fun to have that kind of piece of community where you're all in the same life stage, and your kids are friends, and you really get to build bonds in that way. And then you have your college friends where you do have to make intentional time to hang out with them or meet up at a restaurant or whatnot. And then folks like the farm to table gals, where you get to carve out intentional time, whether you're meeting up in your local city because people are visiting, or you're coming to a retreat. It just really fills your cup because you are able to share kind of the highs of the highs and the lows of the lows of your life, your professional career, etc. And it's just neat to be able to form connections with people from across the country.
Yeah, I felt like just coming here feels like I've known all of you ladies forever. I just like meeting you on Zoom and everything, the joys of the technology that we have, that we can like be across the country and get to know each other, and just felt like we've been talking forever. And then as far as like talking about what Megan was saying about being intentional, what I've discovered is if I don't put things on the calendar, I'm not going to do it. And I can go 6 months to a year without meeting with my best friends. And so, kind of fell into these communities with a book club and a cooking club. So once a month, I'm getting together with 2 separate groups of women that we're here for each other for, again, the highs and the lows and loss and, celebrations for each other. And that has just been literally one of the things that I start to crave if I miss it. So I think that it's really good to be intentional and put it on the calendar and have a group of women who's ready to kind of almost commit to being in each other's lives.
I love that, because I think so many people are trying to find friends that are they're searching because maybe their kids are different ages than their neighbors' kids and their lives aren't like fitting together, but like a book club, or, maybe it's a Bible study, or, something that you're like, this is an activity, but it also becomes like your built-in family and your network and things that you're working towards. So awesome.
And I will just piggyback off of that. Community was so important for me, especially after COVID, after being isolated, to actually be a part of a group and talk to people, whether it was like over Zoom or coming to meetings like this. And I really noticed how my health declined. I started not being able to form sentences and have conversations. So I really noticed that about myself. So not only joining Farm to Table, but I also tried interacting more by going into work and acting, with my colleagues. So I thought that was really important.
I think that's interesting, Amber, that you bring up this concept of the lack of community and kind of the way that lack of community is detrimental to your health and your well-being. And the piece that, like, one of the things that stands out to me is I worked, when I first graduated from pharmacy school, I got a job working at a pharmacy benefit manager. So I was working in the insurance world, and all of my colleagues they were all pharmacists. So we had this thing in common, and you're like, oh yeah, we'll have, something to talk about. But pharmacy can really only get you so far unless you're going to talk about similar pharmacy topics. And I suddenly realized that these people were like, they were super interested in sports and like the latest TV shows and what was on Netflix. And I'm like, I'm not that person. I like to cook. I don't watch TV. I have a garden. And it was really isolating. And I'm in this massive company with all of these pharmacists who I feel like I should be able to be friends with. And I can't, because I don't have a common seat or a common denominator to talk with. And like, I come to these retreats and it truly feeds my soul, because I don't have to be anybody different. I don't have to like pretend like I really know what's going on in the world of sports, because I honestly don't. And like, there are people on our team who do, and it's great because they're willing to like share it and I can learn from it, but they don't have an expectation of like, oh, that sports team. I can't even make a joke about
Can't even like come up with a name.
But we can then like geek out about supplements or like sourdough bread or the newest kind of space age like infrared mat therapy that we're like, oh, let's try this out. And so all of a sudden there's this like tribe. And so I often talk to patients about like, who are these people that light you up? Who do you need to see in your life, and making sure that you take time to see those people, whether it's family members or best friends or colleagues. But like, that is such an essential piece of health that like your primary care doesn't, your primary care doctor is not going to write a script for like, spend 20 minutes with your best friend every day of the week, but really we should.
And I think like I'm going to add to that because it just triggered some thoughts about how as we go through life, like it was super easy making friends when we were in school, and because you're with those people every single day. But as we age, like Angela and Sarah was talking about, like we become more isolated and our vision or our hobbies change. So sometimes like your friends even change and you have to evolve and find that community. So it's better for your health.
Okay. It's really hard. Let's just say as an adult to say like, oh, my friends have changed, my interests have changed, and I don't know. Like all of a sudden, yes, you have to be like, Sarah, we're going to go get dinner. We're going to put it on the calendar right now. And then all of a sudden it's like that, like, okay, well, there's these things here and we have these things here, and finding that. 6 Wednesdays from now. Yep. six Wednesdays from now, we'll figure it out. Or like, Nicole, you're on the other side of the country from me. We need to like text back and forth to figure out when we can meet on Zoom to just catch up, and like scheduling that, and then saying like, oh, this is a new person and I want to be friends with you. Like, we don't say that as adults. Like, hi, I think you're really cool. Can you be my friend? But I think we should more often, because then it helps make sure that they also want to be your friend, and you build that community and you build those connections.
I've seen that like in mom's groups where people will post like, hi, I'm new to the area. Like I have this interest and this interest. Like, who wants to be my friend? And I love that, because I think it's like, so, I mean, they're putting themselves out there. They're saying like, I want connection. I want community. I want it off of this social media platform that really isn't real connection. So I think that's really cool. But I think a lot of times also when people get really isolated, they start to believe like everything they read in a lot of our social media, the post and the news and all of these things. And there's no one else to like bounce those ideas off of, and no one else to like come in and say, well, maybe that isn't completely true. So it really like gets people spinning in a way. I mean, if you think about even some of like the tragedies that have happened, and people start to believe that this is okay, and it ends in a mass shooting of some sort. I mean, that's like an extreme example, but I think there's a lot of times where even in our own minds, we like teach ourselves to believe something that isn't true, because we're not filtering it through the lens of like other people in our world. So Sarah, did you want to chime into anything now?
I kind of wanted to say something on coming from like the patient side. A lot of people come to functional medicine because of their own health journey, maybe a family member or a friend. And I have my own personal health journey, and it was very, very isolating at the beginning. And I mean, this was even before COVID, and I was just kind of, at home. I didn't have a lot of connection at all. I felt like nobody understood what I was going through. And as time went on, I really just learned that trying to find people who get it, and connecting with people is so much, so important to the healing, your journey and healing, just like going to your doctor, your medications, your supplements, all that other, the foundations of health, but community is super important. So I love that I found this group of women. Like Sarah said, we can be ourselves. people who truly get it. So I think that it's just important to find those people. They may not always be your family or your next door neighbor, but truly, just like we've said, intentional a lot, but being intentional about finding people who you can relate to and who get it. It's very, very important.
And I just wanted to add a little bit more too, kind of tagging on with the health and the importance of connection, especially if you're going on this healing journey, like finding people who are supportive, because we know that's not always the case as you're trying to eat differently, like finding other people who can share recipes or support your choices, or people that can help you with movement or exercise. Like I have a walking buddy that we walk every weekend. Like that just really helps to build on those habits for health that you're trying to do, having community that has similar goals or is on the same journey that you are.
Yeah, I love that point. I think there's a lot of great community in the CrossFit. Like I call it the CrossFit community because it's all about, having this group of people that you show up with and you do the work with, but then a lot of them like hang out afterwards or, do other things. But I don't know, that's not like the only gym type that there is out there, but it just seems like they're like a community that does things beyond just the gym. So if people are looking for, ways to connect, maybe it's a yoga studio that you go into if CrossFit isn't your thing, or another type of gym. Shout out to Kelly's Body Shop in Dayton, Ohio, that I enjoy my community with. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also really important to speak to, as you grow and change and evolve as your own human being, finding the right community is so important. And it's important to address leaving the people that are no longer a good fit, because that can be a really, really hard process. But for me, it's more important to find the people that fit you as you are now, rather than try to pretend to fit in and hide pieces of yourself to stay with the same people that aren't necessarily good for you, or you just don't have anything in common anymore. And there's a whole process of like even grieving your past self, of like, this is the person who got me here and that's not the person that needs to bring me forward. That's sort of the same as your community. So your community needs to evolve and grow and change as you do as a human being. And there's so much sadness and grief that we need to be able to acknowledge in this process in order to have this healthy emotional connection with other human beings.
I think that what you just said, Nicole, is such a maybe it's just where I am personally at in my life right now, is a very powerful thing about letting some pieces go and being like, oh, I am not that person, even though that person is like, it is part of the picture of who I am, but it is no longer like front and center object of interest in the middle. It's just kind of making up the background and saying like, it's okay for that stuff to be in the background. And then something that came up is we're talking about like, it's important to have community. It's important to find your community, but like, how do people do it? And it'd be interesting to hear like how everybody here has kind of found their community. Like we've talked on this retreat about how we each came to Pharm to Table through various either social media things or through continuing education events, or through other colleagues who have heard about it. But some of the things that like I have found is like, I have a very close friend, and I found out much later in life that we actually both really enjoy playing games and comic books. And I was like, I didn't know, which is odd because I've known her for good 3/4 of my life, and I didn't know she liked comic books. And so we started kind of going down this rabbit hole, and turns out that like she has friends that also like these sorts of things. And now we have like a group of women, and we were playing long form role playing games, which it's kind of a dorky thing to do, but it's like, it feeds the soul and has nothing to do with work. And it's totally not a group of people I would have necessarily found, but it's like using, maybe you have somebody who knows a lot of other people you don't know, and saying like, hey, let's hang out with some new people. And so now I have this other group of friends, and now we're going to go and like read, romance books. We have a book club. We're going to read romance books and do crafts together. And I'm so excited. So our first one is next month. And I'm like, yes, I can't wait. It'll be so great. But I'd love to hear how everyone here has found kind of maybe a unique way of finding their communities.
Yeah, I think the one of the friend groups that I left from moving away, we for a long time had an ethnic restaurant dinner club. So once a month, we'd rotate who chose the restaurant, but we had all these rules, and you can make up your own rules. But it was go to a restaurant, so you're supporting the local community, and you have an excuse to get a babysitter or to just get off of work early or get there. And that was the most connected that I think I've ever been with a group of friends, is because once a month doesn't seem like crazy. It's not going to break the bank to go out to eat somewhere. And it wasn't the price of the food. It was that it was a different ethnicity of food that than we had like the last time or the last few times. And we keep a spreadsheet and all kinds of nerdy things like that. But that was so cool because that went on for almost 5 years, and then COVID hit, and then we kind of stopped. But it's something that I want to revive in my current community, and then whoever comes can bring a friend and get to meet people that way too.
So one thing I did was, I'm very into like the wellness space. I wanted to meet people who were like-minded. So there was a little local business. I'm from San Antonio, Texas, and they had this like healing bazaar, I think they called it. It was once a month, like the last Sunday of every month, and they had these different vendors, practitioners, just, all kinds of different people. And you could sort of get like a mini session of whatever they offered, if it was acupuncture, sound healing, all kinds of things. And so I just kind of made it a point to go to that, like the last Sunday of every month. Like that was kind of my thing. I would bring maybe a new friend. So I got to kind of have that experience with them. And so I've met some really great people through that. And then book club, which I think Lindsay mentioned, but I love that. So one of my friends created a book club, and she brought some of her friends. So I met new people, and we get to meet and maybe go try a new restaurant and talk about our book. So yeah, that's some of the ways I've found community.
Yeah, and for my book club, that just started off with a friend from social media who happened to show up because she's a military wife. She showed up in Boise and went, "Hey, does anyone want to hang out? Like, I want to hang out as moms." And so then she's like, "Well, does anyone want to start a book club?" So we started a book club. She ended up moving away. We kept the book club going. And now we just kind of drag in all of our bookish friends, anybody that wants to join a book club and make treats and join up once a month and talk about the book that we're reading, the books that we've been reading. And then we did just have someone from Threads go, "Hey, I just moved to Boise. Here are my interests, and I want to join a book club." And both me and the gal who host it saw it, and we were like, "You should come join our book club." So she showed up for the first time a couple months ago. And then I'm also in a cooking club, and that started off with the gal who runs it. She and one other gal were talking, and she loved cooking and she loved hosting, and she wanted a community. As she's starting off being a young mom, and that started in 2015. So then they started with the 8 people for the 8 different courses of a meal, and just as someone leaves, then we you agree with just the community, and then they invite someone new. And I got invited after the first year, so I've been there for 9 years now, and it's just been like during COVID, the craving for community, the loss of that, and like what Amber was saying, the feeling sicker, the feeling sadder, and just the impact on our health. And then post COVID, it's like I appreciated it and recognized that it was something that I needed in my life even more than I did prior to it. Even though it was fun, it felt fun. And, as a young mom with a lot of young kids, it didn't feel like necessarily the life raft that it felt like after COVID. And now I'm like, these are the anchor points in my life.
Yeah. I love the mention of the military family. We live in a military community because there's an Air Force base, even though we aren't in the military. But I found that they are like the easiest people to make friends with because they're all looking for friends because they're moving and transient and, looking to build community. So some of like our richest friendships have been people that we've only like lived in community with for 3 to 4 years that they were in our area, but then are still able to stay in touch with at different times. But I would say that like also living in a newer development has also helped us because we like everyone is new to the space and it's not like we moved in and people have lived here for 30 years. Like the houses are all built, in the similar period of time. But for me, it was like going and knocking on doors and bringing people banana bread when they like moved in and saying, "Oh, do you want to come over for dinner?" And one of our friends who was in one of the churches, I would say one of the richest times in our lives for community was we were a part of it was called a network of house churches, but it was that we met on Sunday, but like every other ministry out of the church like happened through this group of people that you met with in your home. And so, I mean, sort of like the biblical idea of the Acts and, what was happening in that time. But like doing life with those people, like, constantly. And, these women would come over and sit and hold my babies so I could sleep because my husband was out of town, like when I had a newborn, and just like the closeness of all of that. But one of the people, he always said, we have to eat, right? Like we all are eating dinner every night. And so like, if you want, to engage with your neighbors and do those things, like just invite someone over to dinner or invite to meet out to dinner. Like it doesn't take much more effort to double your recipe, to invite the family next door. And we sort of learned that somewhat through the hard way a little bit in our last community. We lived next door to these wonderful people for almost 8 years. And we ended up moving and they had told us like, oh, if you ever need anything, like, don't worry, or let us know if you need anything or need a place to stay, because we had to live somewhere else for 6 months before we could get into our house. And then it was like even longer than that. And so we came back and said, hey, like remember when you said that if we need anything, like let us know. And we were like, could we live with you for like 2 months? And like this was like 2 adults and 2 kids, and like one of them was a crazy 6-month-old baby that was all over the place. Or not, maybe he was probably a little older than that by then. Anyways, maybe 9 months. But they said yes, and they were like the most like hospitable people, and they let us live in the upstairs of their house. They had 3 bedrooms upstairs and their bedrooms downstairs for 2 months. But we got to like such rich like relationship and community now with that couple, and it just like boggled my mind because it was like we lived next door to you for 6 years, but it took like this intentionality. Obviously living with someone is very different than living next door, but like that experience of like the closeness of community in those 2 months was like amazing. And just like thinking about how in other cultures too, like the grandparents and the families and the grandchildren like all live in the same house, and how like that community enriches like everyone's lives. So I think about that a lot, how we like isolate and want our own space and all of those things, but sometimes like the physical like living together component. That's why college is also awesome, because kids go away and live together and learn how to be together. But I don't know, I'm going on sort of a tangent with this. But anyways, there's also a book that it reminds me of called, I think it's called The Teal Table. And this woman like painted a table teal, which maybe is why I like chose teal as part of our colors. But she painted this table teal, and she sat there every morning with her cup of coffee in the front yard of her house, and like people just started coming and sitting down and having coffee with her. And it was just this like exercise in learning to be together and bringing her community together. But so I don't know, but there's lots of like, so that was everything I think we've talked about is like you have to be intentional about it, whether you're painting a table teal and sitting on your front lawn and going out there with coffee to share, or you're inviting someone to dinner, or you're signing up for a book club. I think a lot of people can get in their heads that like, no one wants to be my friend, or no one wants to do this with me. And they're like they're speaking that to themselves in reality. Like there's all kinds of people with your interest. I think about like when you mentioned the crafting and all the things, like the gaming, people that are into like board games, there's whole conventions of like, and we got kicked out. Like we were going to have a conference in Indianapolis one year, and like they told us we couldn't have a hotel like block because the gamers were like in town and it was like taking over all the hotels. So like if that's your thing, that's like awesome, and do that and enjoy it. And so yeah, but Sarah was going to say something. Oh, both Sarahs.
Listening to everyone, I am definitely not intentional. I'm very introverted. Like this is even hard. And just like sometimes even being here, and I mean, I've met some of you, and like stepping out, and like the first day is really tough. And then like getting a little bit more into it. And then in my own community, I came from a really small town. So community just was. Everyone knew everyone. You're just a community. And like moved to a bigger town, still a town to a lot of you, but it's hard. And being intentional and putting yourself out there, and you all like motivate me to want to do that more. I was like another connection with what you were saying, Nicole, earlier. Something that I hear that happens in perimenopause, and ironically, like we're all kind of headed toward that space, but I hear that you just have less cares when you hit perimenopause, and like you aren't gonna really care what other people think about you anymore. And I'm feeling more and more of that, but still there a little bit. But that's part that I look forward to, and I'm kind of leaning into and looking forward to making more of a community in the small one that I'm in.
As you were talking about the building community, and then Sarah, kind of what you sort of brought up is the fact that it's hard, especially if it's not natural to like walk up and talk to somebody and be like, hey, will you be my friend? Or like talk to somebody you don't know. And it reminded me of how I came up with the whole coffee shop pharmacist idea, because there's an element of bravery, I think, that is inherent in building your own community and like finding those friends and making those connections. I would sit and study, and it's so easy to sit and study and like put on your blinders and not pay attention. But sometimes like I would just get super bored of studying. And I would sit right where people would pick up their coffee at this coffee shop. They would come and order, and the coffee shop was very specific about how they made their coffee, and so it took time. You know, you weren't going to go in and get a latte that was like quickly pulled and then milk frothed and just tossed on top. Like they made latte art. If the espresso wasn't dialed in right, they would like take the time to redial it and regrind it and rebrew your whole cup of coffee for you. And so sometimes people are standing there for a good 5, 10, sometimes 15 minutes if there's a lot of drink orders. And so I would just be like, okay, here we go. We're just going to talk to this person and be like, so what you doing today? You know, or like, I'm in Minnesota, so we would talk about the weather, or, you know, they'd be holding a book and I'd be like, oh, what book are you reading? But then because I'm studying and have all my pharmacy stuff out, they would be like, what are you doing? And all of a sudden we started, like this community started to like naturally take place. And it was a really beautiful space because people would come and like, I didn't need their phone numbers. I didn't need to know where they were. Like all I had to do was show up at this coffee shop, and inevitably somebody that I knew would walk in after a time, or somebody who was like interesting and had a different job and had a story to tell would come in and like either pick up their coffee and we would chat a little bit, or they'd like sit down next to me and read the newspaper and we'd like gripe about the current economy or health. Usually it was healthcare stuff. But there's that element of bravery of like jumping into the pool and being able to like talk to the stranger and realizing that they're not, 99% of the time they're going to be friendly, right? You might get somebody who's in a rush and like they may just not talk to you and you're like, well, we'll just try again with the next person. Mm-hmm. But, really supporting people to be brave and take that step can be really, really beneficial.
I wanted to add on to the idea of the living together with people that are not your immediate family. Not quite living together, but I love coming to retreats like this or vacations like this where we're staying in a home and it's a rental home, but we all have a common area. We are preparing meals together. We're doing things together where, like in a hotel, everybody has their own room and then they stay in their own rooms and then okay, well, meet at 5:30 for dinner and you miss the opportunity to connect from 10 a.m. to 5:30 in these slow, casual ways that, there's no pressure to perform, there's no pressure to do or be or look any certain way. This is us as humans, and we get to experience that because we're all humans, and we forget that, especially when we're looking at social media and we only see the highlight reel, and we don't get to see people with messy hair or no makeup or okay, well, like, what am I supposed to be wearing? And then we have the group consensus of like, what's going on here? But we miss that opportunity for community and connection and vulnerability if we don't have like communal space.
I just want to say that some of the best conversations I've had with anybody have been like the ones that had like while we were getting our hair, while we were getting ready to go, not while we're out, but while we're getting ready to go, or when we're sitting, like up late and nobody really wants to go to bed because you don't want to be the last, like you don't want to be the first person to leave the group. And so you like sit and just keep talking and then things get goofy. Like I love those moments. So.
Awesome. Well, this has been just like did you have something else you wanted to?
I just thought it might be important to point out your community does not have to be big.
No.
Right.
And I feel like when I think of community, I think big, and that's not always better. Here in Texas, bigger is better, but I mean, it's quality over quantity, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, 1 to 2 people who just are truly there for you, 110% is just as good as being in all these different book clubs, cooking clubs, all that. So I think that's important too, because it is hard to meet new people and put yourself out there. So
yeah, and especially if that doesn't come natural, like having just like 2 solid people that. And I even think about that for kids and having people outside of parents and outside of aunts and uncles that are like adults in their life that are, or, solid friends that they have the ability to like communicate with and express with is like so important to them growing like into well-rounded people that can communicate needs and things as well. So, well, awesome. Well, thank you guys all for being vulnerable and sharing. I love this. I love that you are here this weekend, but we'll wrap this up and head out to dinner at one of our favorite chain restaurants, but we're going to True Food Kitchen, which is a fun, if you are in one of the cities that has one, is a restaurant by Dr. Andrew Weil started it, who is an integrative medicine physician, and everything on the menu is amazing and options, plenty of gluten-free options. So I'll plug for True Food Kitchen. But thank you again for being here and being part of my community.